Today, we're going to discuss the concept of racism. As a matter of fact, the topic of our conversation today is the scheme of racism, because we thought that it'd be good for us to get an understanding of the purpose and meaning behind racism, why it was created, so that we can kind of get a hold on this thing to make sure that we grow beyond it to manifest success in the world. I want you to be patient with us, because there's no way possible we can talk about all the various aspects of racism that we need to discuss in order for us to heal from this process. That's why we've dedicated the next 4 Sunday discourses to discussing this thing. At the same time, we don't want to offend you or anything that you have endured as a result of racism. We don't want to undermine or make it seem like it's unimportant. We have a strategy that we're going through for the next 4 weeks to ensure that we get to every aspect so we can completely heal from this process, this burden that's been put upon us. So I want you to be patient with us. There's a lot of stress going on in the world today. As a matter of fact, especially in the ages of 18 to 29, stress is becoming a very, very deleterious process to the health and wellness of that age population. As a matter of fact, there's an increase of 50% increase in suicide within that age population. According to the Kaiser Family Foundation, 50% of young adults in that age population have reported having anxiety and depression symptoms. There's also a 300% increase in cancer as a result, within that age demographic as well. Now, most of you guys will say that, the reason why the increase of cancer is taking place is because of poor diet or even food that lacks nutrients. But science has not yet connected the dots to that particular reality. As a matter of fact, if that was the case, then we would see the same increase through all generations, through all age groups. And that has not been proven. What I'm here to say today is that the majority of the reason why you're seeing that sharp decline in mental well-being and physical well-being is because of stress. And what we're saying, the major reason behind the stress is the acceptance of the reality of racism. Now, mind you, I can't sit here and say that all of this is the result of racism, but I am saying that the majority of it is this self-induced stress resulting from the concept of racism, the carrying the burden of racism. So that's why I thought it'd be important for us to discuss it today, because we need to heal from this and increase our health and well-being, increase our emotional happiness, and so on and so on. Science says that the best way to manipulate the cellular integrity of humans, or even at the DNA level, is to introduce the change you want through a virus. So it's through the virus you code whatever change you want, and through the virus you put it in the host, and the virus will make all the changes that you ask for at the DNA and cellular level. Well, racism is a virus. And that virus, if you allow it to be a part of your mental paradigm, if you allow it to be a part of your spiritual paradigm, that virus will re-engineer your divine DNA to support inferiority, to support despair, and to support overall slavery mindset, inferiority, and so on. We feel as though the Mazda philosophy is the antidote. It's the antivirus. Once you accept that into your spiritual paradigm, once you accept that into your mental paradigm, you will be healed from all the negative aspects, negative impact of racism, and able to achieve your greatest success, not only for your individual success, but for your community success as well. You see, what we're saying here, the reason why we're having these classes is because we're saying that we must grow beyond racism in order for us to be successful moving forward. And I'm going to make a profound statement here. The age of Aquarius, the changes that are necessary for us to be successful in the age of Aquarius, America is going to have to transform itself in order to survive and be successful in the age of Aquarius. Part of that success is America has to get a renewed respect for the black community. So in other words, what I'm saying is, according to the age of Aquarius and according to the necessary changes that are coming down the pipe as communicated through our ancestors, that society must adopt and respect the black genius, the very black genius that it has suppressed through racism. It must not only respect that genius, but it must bring it to the forefront to allow us to move on and be successful in this next age. In order for us to survive and be successful, to take advantage of the black genius, the concept of racism must become null and void in America. You see, it's the black genius, the very thing that allowed black indigenous people to build great civilizations, those very civilizations from which, quote unquote, white civilizations conquered. The very genius that built those things, that were able to empower people and grow them and bring them into their greatest talents and skills, to use for the society, to use those talents and skills to build pyramids, to build science, to bring math and medicine and all these different things that were brought to the world through the black genius, from which was conquered by European civilizations. That very genius is necessary to move us forward. As the Bible says, it says, the meek shall inherit the earth. In order for us to survive, we have to drop two realities that racism puts us into. The first one is white supremacy. The second one is black inferiority. We have to drop both of those in order for us to move forward. We're not going to discuss a lot about white supremacy today. We will discuss it moving forward in another Sunday discourse. But today we want to discuss the concept of racism, the scheme of racism, and how racism came about. Now, what most people don't understand is that racism, the root word of racism is race. It's a competition. What is it? What are we competing for? We're competing for resources. You see, in my opinion, racism is a resource management system. See, you actually think, black man, black woman, you actually think that it's a system built purposely to put you down. You see, white man and white woman, you think it's something that was built to give you power. No, it wasn't built to do neither. It is simply a resource management tool. It is used to keep the resources, the majority of the resources, in the hands of a few. So let's look at it for a second. Let's go into greater detail so that we can kind of get a great sense of this. There are two problems that racism solves for the few, right? The 1%ers. The first thing is, how do you keep black people in a lower class, poor class, repetitive system, right? How do you keep them in that system by which you could take advantage of low-wage workers that are going to do most of the hard labor jobs, the farm jobs and the housekeeping jobs and things of that nature? Now, I know some of you guys may be too young to remember that prior to bringing over immigrant labor, that the majority of those jobs were done by black people. As a matter of fact, I was fortunate enough to grow up in the South, where I grew up in a orange grove, grapefruit grove, right, fruit area, and also a fernery. And I remember most of those jobs were done by black people. As a matter of fact, they called them seasonal jobs, where blacks from North Carolina, South Carolina would come down to Florida to do those jobs and go back home. Now, if you go back and look at the statistics during that time, I guarantee you'll find a lower crime rate, a lower violence rate, a lower single household rate, because people had jobs. But overnight, the immigrant labor came in and took over, because even though blacks were getting paid pennies for their work, immigrant labor came in and said they'll do it for even half of that. And so literally overnight, I woke up one morning and saw that the black workers were completely replaced by immigrant labor. But that's a whole nother conversation. So one of the aspects of racism starting out in the early 1900s and so on and so on was to how do we keep this group, this population, in a perpetual servitude position by which the only option that they can possibly have is to work low wage, low income jobs. And of course, that's what Jim Crow was about. It's criminalizing people to force them to do free labor. An aspect of racism that we must consider is white people. What the second problem that it solves for rich people. During the feudal and authoritarian time of Europe, one of the most dangerous things to the nobility, the kingship, the authority, was, quote unquote, this concept called making a run on the castle, or rebellions. That was the most dangerous thing to the nobility. Why? Because the peasant population, which was the majority of those cities, those nations, the wealth gap was so extreme that the peasants were actually starving while the nobility ate high on the hog and threw food away that could have been used for the peasants. So one of the most dangerous threats to the nobility at that time was these peasants organizing and creating a rebellion, making a quote-unquote run on the castle. So what racism does is it controls poor, lower class, lower middle class white people, diverts them away from the true source of their pain and suffering, which is the rich nobility, the 2%ers, the 1%ers. That's essentially what racism does. If you study this process within American racism, if you go back into history, you'll see this clear as day in the early 1900s with the movie Birth of a Nation. That movie was specifically created to inflame poor whites and lower middle class whites, to inflame them, to divert their violent tendencies towards black people. In other words, within that movie, the concept that was put out was black people were immoral, incapable of controlling themselves. If you give them any power whatsoever, they're going to take over. And all these things, and poor white people, this concept of white supremacy was created to develop a sense of supremacy and self-worth in a time where everything in their lives didn't support that. So this self-worth of white supremacy was directly related to how they managed black people. So therefore, their violence towards black people was justified because it was necessary to control this population that if you allowed it to get out of control, you saw what happened on Birth of a Nation. We can't have that. So that was a system, a movie, purposely put together by the wealthy to program poor whites and lower middle class whites to divert their animosity from the true source towards blacks. And that's what created that theme of control. That's the foundation of racism. White supremacy impedes the spiritual progress of white people. That was the concept that was taught to them as a mechanism of control. At the same time, black inferiority was something that was perpetuated on black people to keep them in that wage category that they are, right? They can never work anything above low wage, right? So that's why you get it. You go to jail, you get a felony, you can't get the good jobs anymore. The only jobs you can get are what? The farming jobs, the jobs that most people don't want to do. So it was just a perpetual system to keep us in that level of servitude. Now today, again, as I said earlier, we're not going to go through a whole bunch about white supremacy. We'll dedicate a whole concept to that. But today I wanted to talk more so about this black inferiority and how we unconditionally, even unconsciously accept this concept. And these concepts we accept actually put us at odds with our own success. They create this sense of inferiority within us, even though we think we're using it as a weapon towards white people or a weapon towards the people that are responsible for the racism towards us. So we have to kind of get into great detail about these so we can heal ourselves from these. There are three aspects of black inferiority that I thought would be important for us to discuss today. The first one is what I call fear. The violence in the early 1900s, to the 60s or whatever, that violence was necessary because the powers that be understood that it was necessary to induce fear and to get black people to identify with fear. All right? Now, here's what identifying with fear does. Imagine you have an electric fence around your yard and your dog goes out and gets zapped. Each time he goes to the boundaries of that fence, he gets zapped. Eventually, you can remove the electric fence and the dog will never push the boundaries anymore because he's been programmed through the pain to stay in a line. Well, that is exactly what fear does. The fear of violence, that's why you go, why did white society allow this to happen? Why did good, quote unquote, white people allow this to happen? Well, it was a reason why they allowed it to happen, because they wanted to create that electric fence. They wanted to make black people identify with the fear. So that way, even without being forcefully controlled, they're going to stay in the line. The second one is what I call despair. And this one is a little bit different because this is a mental concept by which we see white people as this omnipowerful, omnipotent, all-powerful evil that cannot be overcome. Even in the most, for lack of a better word, blackest, pro-black, militant black organizations, they still talk about white people as this omnipotent force, right? White man has all the knowledge. You can't have more knowledge than the white man, and so on and so on, even though they're trying to win against the white man. It's funny, they're trying to win this battle against white people, but at the same time, turning them into omnipotent villains that in actuality, unbeknownst to them, creates a level of despair within the people they're trying to rise up. And so when we address white people, even though we say that, we say, oh, they're evil, and we make that false conclusion, oh, they're evil, right? You're still poking fun at them. You're still calling them names, so to speak, but you are psychologically creating despair in your people, in your children, by saying that this entity has all the knowledge possible that could possibly have, and it's impossible for you to win against him, even though you're trying to win against him. That creates this concept of despair, that this system is rigged against me and it's impossible for me to win against it. So therefore now I'm depressed. Therefore now I'm on anti-anxiety drugs. Therefore now I'm on antidepressant drugs, and so on and so on. So the second aspect of black inferiority is our identification with white people as this omnipotent evil that's impossible to overcome unless they decide that they're going to give up this concept of racism. And we don't have time to discuss it today, but that has put us to this day in a very negative position as far as our own self-worth and self-reliance. But we'll discuss that later. The third aspect of black inferiority I thought it would be good for us to discuss is this perpetual fight against racism. This is where we are now. This is where young people are now, this activism, right? This concept that now, in order for you to survive, you must fight racism. You have given up self-reliance, self-agency. You have given up all these things. And you're saying that in order for us to have success, we have to destroy racism. So therefore, there's this perpetual, constant fight of racism. Everything is blamed on racism. The fact that we are not good in relationships, that's blamed on racism. The fact that our health is diminished, that's blamed on racism. The fact that we're not doing well in the job market, that's blamed on racism. See, everything now is blamed on racism, and the strategy is to fight racism to achieve these things. And what this does to us, it obstructs us from creating and developing do for self, self-reliance, self-agency. You see, all three of these, the reason why we're having this conversation, the reason why we thought it was necessary to have this conversation, is because all three of these are putting us against the foundational principle of Ma'at and our divine power that we have within us. You see, black inferiority, the concept of racism, has put us in a position by which we are consciously now going against Ma'at. And that is the only way you can experience misery, suffering, poverty. But see, you've been tricked to think that it's the white people and racism that's the cause, when in reality, it's impossible for something to obstruct you. But I can condition you to think that I can obstruct you, which gives me power over you. And so these three concepts of black inferiority is something that you've been conditioned to think, which in actuality is putting you against your divine essence, the same divine essence that built pyramids and things of that nature. So in order for us to heal ourselves, in order for us to get to a place where we can save America, we must release ourselves from the destructive nature of these three concepts. And that's why we're having this conversation today. The Ma'asah philosophy says this, that you are the source manifesting through the limitations of the mind itself. We use the term source instead of God. So if you want to say you are God manifesting through the limitations of the mind itself, that's perfectly fine. You are the source. You cannot point to somewhere else and say God is over here and I'm over here. That's impossible. The only way you can experience God is look in the mirror. The only way you can experience God is look at your brothers and sisters. This concept of Ari, which is a foundational concept of the Ma'asah philosophy, says that if I was to take your atomic body away, if I was to take your spiritual body away, if I was to take your mental body away, what would be left is simply awareness, this indivisible awareness. This awareness is the same for everybody. So one of the foundational principles of the Ma'asah says that we are a singular awareness manifesting through diverse experiences. We are a part of a shared salvation working for the collective whole. Therefore, our abundance and prosperity is the result of manifesting selflessly towards each other. So therefore, according to the Ma'asah philosophy, one of the foundational principles, Ari, is called Ari. According to that principle, racism is something that has absolutely no validity on its basis. There is no such thing as white supremacy. There's no such thing as black supremacy. There's no such thing as black inferiority. There's no such thing as white inferiority. We are all expressions of the source. And once we understand that, now we can go to work to manifest selflessly towards each other, to where our unique genius and things of that nature can be used to not only save this nation, but bring it into its greatness it has yet to see. You know, if I was to create a hat or an acronym, you know, my acronym would be MAGFO, Make America Great for Once. I'm sorry. But anyway, we have to get above the concept of racism. And in order for us to survive and do well in the age of Aquarius, to bring America forward, we have to drop these things and understand that we are the source manifesting through the limitations of the mind. The quickest way for success, for blessings, abundance, and prosperity is self-agency, self-reliance, because as the source manifesting through the limitations of the mind itself, I have 100% ability to bring those all into manifestation myself. And when I blame things outside of me, I'm stepping outside of the realm of a system that was built for my benefit. Let's meditate.